I'm Bronwyn Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions. We provide human resource services, advice, solutions, support to regionally based small to medium enterprises and not-for-profit organisations. And we are here to help you and your organisation through these somewhat challenging times. We are live at 9:15 every weekday with an update on new information, in this case, what's occurred since Friday. And more detailed information about topics related to staffing and business management, which you, our audience, are telling us that you'd like to know more about. Plus, we're choosing topics at different times depending on what's being released and so on and so forth. So please ask us any questions as we go along in the chat screen, and I'll do my best to answer those. Outside of this, you can contact myself and my splendiferous team anytime via Facebook. Private messenger is fine. Email, telephone. The details will no doubt go up in the comments, which my staff will put up there shortly. So, okay, so I hope everybody had a terrific weekend, had an opportunity for some rest and relaxation. Let's just start with some breaking news and changes that people need to be aware of since last Friday, the 24th of April. So one of the most interesting things, and something that everybody needs to be aware of if you're an employer or an employee for that matter, that last Friday, the Prime Minister, after the National Cabinet meeting, unveiled new workplace safety principles. The 10 principles have been agreed by the National Cabinet, which of course, as we know, incorporates state, territory and the federal governments. And those safety principles have been developed in response to COVID-19 and are intended to provide national consistency for COVID-19 work health and safety, at the same time as recognising that states and territories obviously have their own jurisdictions for work health and safety. So we're going to pop up the Prime Minister's press release about this, which gives you an insight into those 10 principles. We can do a separate session actually on those principles and how they will apply and impact your work health and safety obligations during COVID. And we'll also give you the link to Safe Work Australia for information about that as well. And as I said, we might identify this as a topic moving forward. So once you've had a chance to have a look at that, let us know if you'd like more information and detail, if you have questions, etc. That would be fantastic. So the other thing that's been announced by the New South Wales State Government since Friday is a $395 million stimulus package for councils. This is very good news for regionally based councils, for all councils, I'm sure, but especially for those servicing regional areas. It's the intention of the package is to provide a bit of a safeguard for local councils in terms of jobs, infrastructure, and of course council services. So the New South Wales Treasurer has said that obviously, and has recognised that the COVID-19 crisis has hit councils particularly hard. You might remember that when we were looking at the childcare package that the federal government had introduced, that didn't incorporate council-run, local government-run childcare facilities, for example, and so there needed to be some workarounds then. This is a wider sort of response, if you like. The package is intended to help councils at the moment and to help them bounce back once we come out of the other side, whatever the other side looks like. So the package comprises a number of components. $250 million of it will be an increase in low-cost loans to eligible councils through the state's borrowing facility. $112.5 million is allocated to maintaining council jobs, and that's a not dissimilar presentation to JobKeeper, but for a 3-month period initially. What obviously we will be now looking at is to see what the reality is for the Northern Inland, in particular for our region, and how it unravels across the region. So we will keep you further updated around that. So also, obviously, JobKeeper registration opened with the ATO last Monday, so a week ago now. Ideally, if you want to see reimbursement as soon as possible, you should get all of your registration information into the online ATO portal using your MyGov ID by the 30th, so by Thursday. You do actually have until the end of May if you need it, but it means it would delay the payment that you would get. There's been a lot of concern from business owners in terms of the fact that obviously many have had to pay staff more than what they would normally earn, or have not had the ready cash to do that. Obviously, I mentioned last Friday that the big four banks have introduced hotlines for their business clients to get in touch for emergency loan support so that they can pay their staff before they start getting reimbursed through JobKeeper. And obviously those borrowings is something that are making businesses quite anxious. And obviously the JobKeeper repayments through the ATO will be done monthly in arrears. So you're going to have to continue to make those payments upfront and then have reimbursement at the end of the month. The ATO has also recently set out alternate tests for a fall in turnover. There are a number of tests related to the commencement of a business and disposal of business where the current business is therefore not the same as the earlier one. And significantly, particularly for regional areas, an alternative test has been devised that also applies to where the business was affected by drought or other declared natural disaster during the comparison period. And that was certainly a concern that was raised, that it was very difficult to apply the general comparison period from 19 to 20, for example, when businesses were just trying to, claw themselves out of drought and bushfires before COVID hit. So we will give you the links to where those alternative tests apply and what that looks like. Obviously, if you've got specific information about the application of those tests, etc., best to talk to your accountant or your financial advisor. Okay, and a reminder too that the New South Wales Government Small Business Grant is also available. That's $10,000 for you to do a range of things, including getting professional advice. And we will give you the link again. I know we've been spruiking that since last week when it came out, but it's important for people to remember that that's there. Okay, so today's topic is devoted to pivoting and or ramping up your business. We obviously have had inquiries and needed to provide support to a range of businesses that have had to downsize, close, stand down staff, make staff redundant, etc. And we've covered off those topics previously. But today I really want to pay some attention to those who might have had to do some of that in the case of pivoting their business, so literally changing their business model and their service delivery, etc., between one day and the next. And those who have actually, who are actually ramping up their business in that time because they have identified opportunities in the current market, which means that they've actually been able to reposition and start again to grow their business. So before we get into, I've got a couple of case studies that obviously I'm not going to identify who they are, but that I would like to share with you to give you some examples of the kinds of things that the business have been doing in terms of pivoting or ramping up. There's some guidelines, I guess, I'd like to give you first of all as business owners in terms of whether you are contemplating this yourself at this point in time. And the first thing is to try and envisage the new normal. So before you go about making any major decisions, it's important that you spent some time really devising and understanding the long-term social, societal changes that could impact your business long after the pandemic is over. And this is where we've been helping a lot of businesses with their workforce planning. So how to position their workforce to be able to, respond to that, not just the short and the medium term, but what might be coming down the pipe. What's the world going to look like? The reality is at this point in time that we still really don't know. We've had a lot of success in Australia at this point in terms of flattening the curve. But I saw a fantastic meme the other day that explained that trying to take for governments to look at taking their foot off restrictions at the moment would be like jumping out of a plane, going, "Oh, that's good. My parachute has opened and it's now slowing my rate of speed of decline out of the plane before I hit the ground," and then deciding during the descent that actually probably don't need the parachute anymore. So we really don't know yet what this is going to look like longer term. However, there are some trends and predictions that have begun to emerge that can clue us into what's in store. And so really important as businesses for you to be clued into those things and be talking about them and seeing how they're going to impact your business. What we do know from the economic side is that Australia's economy is likely to shrink by at least 6 to 7% in 2020, and that the global economy is likely to see the worst recession since the Great Depression, well surpassing the GFC. So I don't want to depress anybody, but we're dealing with fragile economic circumstances, which all of us are living through, and we I'm no doubt are seeing firsthand. If those predictions end up being manifest, then spending is likely to decline across a wide range of industries. So with that in mind, obviously businesses focusing on keeping costs low and operating leanly, even after the lockdown is over. And those things may be critical to business sustainability. So the decisions you're making now, yes, need to be made now in terms of the current and projected issues for the next few months, but we also need to be keeping a very close eye on the longer term. One of the things that we're seeing happen routinely, and it's actually really, it's one of the exciting things about crises like this when they come about, and that is that there has been a significant push for innovation. And it's forcing businesses to rapidly operate in new and different ways. And resilience is being tested, God, like never before. So with those new changes come new challenges around business continuity, workflows, resourcing, security, productivity, all of these things that are happening in our businesses. And those that are pivoting now, that are really have shifted their focus and are responsive but also proactive, are those that will come out on top. The ones that address and overcome the challenges by quickly implementing new systems and processes. Innovation is going to be an absolutely critical component of ensuring business continuity and growth as we go through this period and out the other side post-COVID. Whatever the new normals look like post-COVID. So the other thing I think it's really important to keep in mind is that while the move towards digital was already happening, clearly COVID and the lockdown consequences have dramatically increased the demand for operating online. And one of my case studies is a classic example of that. So digital channels and e-commerce have proved to be a lifeline for many businesses that normally rely on offline trading, person to person, for example. KPMG, as an example, predicts that Australia will see accelerated e-commerce growth as a result of the pandemic, while an increase in obviously digital activity paves the way for the digitisation of marketing channels that were previously considered offline only. it's really important for all of us as business owners to, in our processes of planning and looking forward, that to consider digital as a key part of our strategy when it comes to selling, marketing, and connecting with customers, because this is well and truly taken over as the new normal. The other thing that we've seen businesses that are pivoting quickly and ramping up are doing is comprehensively and necessarily reevaluating their business strategy. And that means that this pandemic has required many businesses to make operational adjustments at an unprecedented speed. Some businesses have been trading one day and not allowed to open in their traditional form the next. Others have, as a consequence of those things, had the knock-on effects have meant that their business operations model, our business included, has been relevant one day and not relevant the next. So stopgap measures might be helpful to keep you stay afloat temporarily, but they're not going to be a long-term viable solution for your business moving forward. So reevaluating your strategy is incredibly important. So redefining and rebuilding a post-COVID strategy is going to be incredibly important, and there's some key elements of that you need to consider. What's your customer base going to look like once the pandemic is over? Obviously, your customer base is likely to have already shifted substantially. What's it going to look like, do you think, once we're past the pandemic? How can you continue to deliver value to customers? Where and how will you be able to sell your products or services? What financial, human, and physical resources are going to be available to you? How might your operating and overhead costs change? One of the things that is being speculated about is the volume of people that are working remotely is possibly going to lead to a lot of businesses questioning whether they have commercial premises in the same way as they had pre-COVID. And what sources of revenue could be available to you that are new or might be avenues that you've never considered before. So while we may not exactly know what the future holds, answering those kind of questions now can help us have clarity when the opportunity arises to ramp up operations. So deciding whether to pivot back post-COVID depends on your business model and your goals. So for many businesses, a successful strategy is likely to include some pre-COVID principles, but also some new initiatives that really do leverage emerging opportunities. And the best, most successful businesses at the moment are the ones who can pivot quickly. Staying agile is going to allow you to adapt quickly and cost effectively. So rather than making major investments and decisions now, it will be likely smarter to continue to operate leanly while working in a tentative framework for the future as the situation evolves. So I'm going to give you a couple of case studies this morning. I thought that might be interesting to take a bit of a deeper dive into a couple of organisations that have or are in the process of pivoting and ramping up. The first organisation is a business that had, and these are both small businesses, so under 15 headcount, as per the Fair Work Act definition of what a small business is. So the first business had already diversified its business offerings in response to the drought. So, and this is something that I think we need to acknowledge, and I'm very pleased to see that the government have sensibly introduced some changes to the way comparative revenue can be assessed for JobKeeper for businesses that have been drought and bushfire affected, because a lot of businesses that we've been supporting over the last few years have been desperately clinging on through drought and bushfires, and then we were hit with the pandemic. So this particular business had already diversified during the drought years. So it had already, as a lot of businesses had challenges through drought and bushfire, which the business owners had already been pivoting. Its core business, and as much as it had diversified, it still had a significant core business offering. was significantly hit by COVID. So it literally, work fell off a cliff come April. The business at the time that initially happened, which was a number of weeks ago, couldn't foresee when that core business would pick up again, but they needed to maintain a degree of flexibility around as and when that happened, in terms of making sure that they had good skilled resources to put to it. So what they did do was that in looking at the diversification of the business across different markets that they had started to explore and invest in through the drought years, they diverted some of their sales team to a fledgling product with great potential for during the COVID period. So those sales staff were previously working in areas that were associated with the core business, which had really taken a nosedive. So they stood some staff down in the core business area, and then progressively have a plan to bring some staff back. And they look like they'll be eligible for JobKeeper. So that's going to give them access to the JobKeeper directives, the changes to the Fair Work Act that enable JobKeeper eligible employers to give a range of directives, and that will give them access to flexibilities that they otherwise wouldn't have had. So they have stood some staff down. Some staff remain stood down, particularly in that core business area. But their plan is that as their core business comes back online, and that is slowly happening, that they'll have the flexibility to bring some of those staff back relative to their skills and expertise, and how that can be deployed in the business in areas of growth and demand. They've pivoted the work of other staff into new markets. Now, this actually ended up being something they could do quite feasibly, because they had great employment contracts and robust position descriptions in place. So they were able to pivot some of their staff into completely new markets. And they chose, in deciding with their stand down in their core business area, the staff they chose to keep in the core business area and not stand down were those who were the most multi-skilled staff, to keep that core business operational. And in fact, the operations manager in that enterprise actually went back onto the tools for part of the time, in order to keep, vital arteries, if you like, of the business functioning, while the demand, gradually rebuilt, at the same time as diverting some of their team into new markets and a fledgling product, which has so far proven to be, already, even at this early stage, a few weeks in, very successful. What they also determined to do from the outset is to progressively assess the skills and expertise that they needed across their business, targeting existing staff to those needs. So they were able, and the staff were able to see clearly exactly what they were doing and why they were allocating staff in different ways. Obviously consulted frequently and often with their staff, which is incredibly important. What they also determined to do was to use contracted support for other areas where they didn't have the skills. And that's something which, they're not making the commitment of additional staff or staff in different areas. They're doing contract support. So they've got independent contractor support for certain areas where they need those skills. So that's the first organisation. The second organisation had to pivot to online and delivery models overnight. Now, they already had a very small online presence and used outsourced delivery for that online. But they literally were not able to trade in their normal trading, literally from one day to the next. So what they did was, we helped them to assess the skills and experience of their current staff really quickly. They moved to stand down several who didn't have the skills, experience and qualifications to pivot in the way that they were planning. They talked to their staff regularly, about what's happening. They got their ideas. The staff were willing to pivot to different duties they were capable of, even before the award amendments came in. And some of the previous sessions we've talked about amendments that were made to the Clerks Private Sector Award, and to other awards in hospitality and retail to allow employers to move their staff into different kinds of work for which they were reasonably skilled and experienced and qualified to do. So in this instance, there were staff that didn't have those skills and experience, so it would have been really inappropriate to move staff into areas that they weren't experienced to be able to do. Other staff were, and they were happy to pivot. They talked to their bank to get their overdraft extended. They also look like they'll be eligible for the JobKeeper wage subsidy, which will be great. They then engaged contractors to help with their online ramp up and their supply chain support. So they needed marketing, IT, web, all of that support which they didn't have in-house. They needed their bank to not only help with wages, but also this investment that they were going to need to make in order to get their online and delivery components becoming their main source, their main drivers during this period. They also then did something quite innovative just in the last couple of weeks, and that's where they've actually employed delivery drivers regionally. And what they've done is they've actually entered into contracts for service with other small businesses in a few regional areas that also need deliveries done. And so they've employed the people and put them on to do their deliveries, but they're also offering contracted delivery service to other small businesses in the same regional areas. So it's actually keeping their employees productively engaged by offering contract for service to other small businesses as well. So they've actually been able to make that investment in the delivery side of their business really pay by being able to share that service and get cost recovery for it from other businesses as well that were not in a position to make those investments themselves or couldn't afford the kind of prices that larger delivery and freight options were requiring of them. Okay, so in terms of the practical realities of pivoting your business and potentially ramping up, the first I would really emphasize is to consult with your staff. Whatever you're going to do or you might need to do, and you might need to do it very quickly, you still need to consult with your staff. You've got obligations to do that, and it's really important. It's incredibly important to be talking often and regularly to your staff at the moment about what's happening and getting their thoughts and ideas, etc. Make sure you have, if you don't already, robust employment contracts, position descriptions, independent contractor agreements if you're contracting services in from other organisations, policies, procedures. Those things are going to be so incredibly important to you at the moment. I cannot tell you, for lots of different reasons, not the least of which mitigating your risk. Ensure you've got good policy in place. Follow the steps that your policy has. Make sure entitlements and obligations are crystal clear the whole way along. And establish clear expectations, particularly as and when those expectations are shifting, which necessarily will be the case during COVID as businesses, try to sort of keep half a step ahead if possible, what's happening. And communicate often. I can't emphasize that strongly enough. If you're not sure, ask us. We're here to help. We can make sure you meet your employee obligations in the same way that your tax accountant makes sure that you meet your tax obligations. You don't need to know this stuff chapter and verse. We do. And we can partner with you to make sure that those things happen and that you keep your business going and potentially have an opportunity to really pivot and grow through this period. So thank you so much. That's it from me. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you've got specific questions about your business, I notice I might have to take any questions that have come through on notice. Or if you need help, contact us anytime. The contact details are in the chat screen. Tomorrow, our wonderful psychologist, Jess Pearson, will be talking about strategies and tips for dealing psychologically with the hard stuff of business happening at the moment. So that's letting your people go, managing business threats, watching your hard work seemingly go to waste. Those things which are psychologically incredibly hard for all of us as business owners at the moment. We want to unpack some of those tips and strategies with you. So please invite your colleagues and friends. We'd love to see them. We always love to see you every weekday morning. So in the meantime, please hug the people that you can, wave cheerily at those that you can't, and stay safe, stay home, wash your hands a lot, and I'll look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Thank you.